Ruben, thank you so much for joining me at LSI Europe.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Tell me a little bit about your company.
So I'm from Onera Health. I'm CEO, founder of Onera Health. We are a company that we do sleep diagnostics and monitoring. We take sleep diagnostics and monitoring to the patient home.
That's fascinating. Is that normal? Where do you normally have a sleep diagnostic performed if you need one?
That's a really good point. So typically, if you don't sleep well, if you want to be diagnosed for a sleep disorder, you go into a sleep clinic. So a sleep lab. That's the gold standard basically. So what happens is that you walk in, they hook you up with all sort of wires. You look a little bit like a Christmas tree, basically, and then you'll get to sleep in the lab. So it's a clinic. It's like a hospital. And then they look at you, and then the next morning you go home. After a few weeks, you get a study, the results of your study. So that's exactly what we are changing, actually. Wow. So what we are doing is we're taking that study, the gold standard study that's so expensive, that's requires a lot of supervision and technicians and so on. And of course, it's also a horrible user experience. We're taking that into the patient's home for the first time. So now imagine that you could do the same type of study with the same diagnostic power, but just in your bed, at home. You could even apply it yourself. We made it so easy that you can just hook it up yourself. It's a few patches that you stick, that you click, and you're done.
Wow. So going into a sleep clinic, I imagine sort of like going into a hospital or seeing the doctor, there's a lot of anxiety. Does that affect the outcomes of a sleep diagnostic test?
We can imagine, right? Yeah. That's what everyone expects, because basically, there's a lot of first night effects that's known about studies in general, about tests in general. When you are not in your bed and you go somewhere else, then for sure it affects anything you do, anything you test. And then the other element is that sleep disorders can be quite complex. So there are certain issues that you'll see on some nights and you won't see in some other nights as well. So in the sleep lab at the clinic, you get one shot. You go that night, in a different place, and you get one shot to identify what's going on, right? Now, the moment you're at home, you can look at different windows, at different moments where you want to test, what's going on. So you could do one night, you could do a second night, you could do a third night. So you really open a whole lot of new opportunities to better reflect how usually sleep is for you.
So this sounds like it could really change the way sleep disorders are diagnosed and understood, improving that quality of life for the patient. Tell me, how many people have a sleep disorder? How common is this?
Yeah, it's a huge problem. It's really a huge issue. We're really seeing just the tip of the iceberg in a way. So we estimate 1 in 5 have a sleep disorder. 1 in 5 of the entire world.
Wow. So is there a linkage or any potential to use sleep diagnostics such as yours to diagnose other neurological conditions? Is sleep a powerful indicator for certain neurological conditions?
Yeah, so there are two ways to look at this. So on the one hand, sleep disorders themselves. So there are many. They're very complex. We hear a lot about sleep apnea, but there are hypersomnia, narcolepsy, really many, very many. Some of them are more linked to cardiorespiratory issues. And some others are more linked to the neuro side, like what's going on in your brain versus what's going on in your lungs, what's going on in your heart. So it's pretty complex on its own. How sleep relates to all of those elements. Now, what we are saying is that there's a huge level of comorbidity. So people who already are a cardiac patient or respiratory patient, they're very likely to have a sleep disorder as well, maybe 50% even of those. So basically, if you are treated for one or another thing, if you would know better what is your patient having a sleep disorder, yes or no, you might change the course of treatment for that patient and actually make it much better for that person. So neurology is a very good example. It's a very clear case. We're actually seeing during the pandemic and after the pandemic, a lot of people didn't even listen too much to their bodies, right? To how they're sleeping. And now all of a sudden, hey, actually not sleeping that well, what's going on? And at the same time, we've seen a huge surge of mental issues, right? Depression and whatnot. So that's an element that is known, that there is a pretty strong correlation as well with mental illness, with the neuro side, and sleep. So that's really our goal. What we're trying to do is to lower that threshold for people to be able to do a study, to be able to do a gold standard sleep study quickly. And now it's just so hard to get it done that, just let it sit and sit and sit.
I'd like to understand the technology a little bit more. You mentioned that it's a wearable device, you put it on, you go to bed. Are you using any sort of proprietary algorithms or biomarker collection to conduct and analyze sleep in the house, in the home?
Yeah, so yes and no, actually. So what we have done is polysomnography, which is the gold standard. We call it PSG in short. It's been the gold standard in the lab for many years, over 30 years. This is what doctors are trained for. They understand it. They are able to understand all of those signals. They're very complex and very many, right? They can understand them really well. And we've got many, many treatments. So we're not short of treatments. So here the tough thing is, how do we get many diagnosed? How do we connect them to the right treatment? And then how do we make sure that the treatment is actually working? Now, that technology is well established. So we didn't want to reinvent the wheel here.
Sure.
We didn't want to come up with something totally different. So what we said was, let's make that technology that's great, that we understand, that's really good, available outside. So how can we just turn it into something very simple that people are not afraid of, non-invasive, they can apply it themselves. So we put a lot of effort into that. And of course, we built a lot of secret sauce and special technologies to be able to do just that, right? Clinical grade with a great user experience. So a lot of our work went into that. Of course, we realized that just a device will not fully change the user experience and entire pathway. So what we've done is to create an entire software platform around it, a cloud platform. So what we actually do is that we go end to end. So doctor requests a study, we ship the centers, you apply it at home, we analyze the data, deliver a report back to the clinician, and the clinician is able to issue a final diagnosis or to initiate therapy. So it's really the full thing.
Democratization and accessibility in healthcare is a really important issue that we're trying to address right now. So it's great hearing how you guys are doing so in sleep diagnostics. Tell me a little bit about what stage your company is at.
Yeah. So we've been working very hard these past years, and that got us to a product that's CE marked for Europe.
Okay.
And FDA cleared for the US. So this happened just earlier this year. The FDA
Congrats.
cleared. So thank you. That was a huge win. Very exciting. It opened a lot of doors. And it was a very strong clearance because we were able to demonstrate substantial equivalence, which is a technical term, and against the gold standard traditional PHE system. So that opened all the doors for us. And we just launched our PSG as a service offering earlier this year. We were in June in the US, the major event, Sleep Congress, and in Europe, at the European Respiratory Society Congress in Barcelona in September. So we just got out there. We've got a very long list of clinicians that would like to work with us. So I asked them a little bit of patience as well, right?
Right.
But we're getting there. So we're just setting up all our first customers in Europe and in the US.
You're FDA cleared. You're in Europe with the CE mark. Are you pursuing a specific territory there, or are you trying to go to both right now?
Yeah. So we go both to the
Yeah.
US and Europe. We've been in the US already for a few years, although with a small organization, and we're ready to grow it. In Europe is pretty big, and there are many countries, and they all have differences. So we like to be everywhere in Europe as well, and in the future, everywhere in the world, of course, because it's about democratizing sleep, as you know, democratizing access to healthcare. I mean, our goal is to make healthcare and sleep diagnostics monitoring, in this case, very, very accessible to anyone who needs it. So that's our dream. But bear with me. For now, in Europe, we're going to be in Germany and in the Netherlands.
Tell me a little bit about your scaling plans. What's coming next
Yeah.
for you guys?
Yeah. So we have a bit of like a two-step approach, if you will. So right now, what we want to make sure is that our product, our PhD service offering, fits really well in the clinical pathway, the patient journey, and so on. So we're testing that out in the market with a few key customers in these geographies, in Germany, the Netherlands, in the US, a few key players, and yeah, again, making sure it fits really well. It's a great user experience. We learn from it, we improve as we might need, and that's what we're doing. And once that's working very, very well, then we're gonna be ready for a lot of volume. And again, because it's about democratizing access to healthcare, it's about making it as available as possible to as many as possible. We are building a fully scalable solution. So that's something that's in our DNA from day one. So absolutely anything we build needs to be very scalable. So, we've got our own chip technology actually to allow us to, to get to patches, to devices that will scale in volume. We've got a cloud platform so that we can do AI assisted scoring, and that's what we call the analyzing all of the signals and so on. And we have an end-to-end business model as well that's built for scalability, right? So that we are able to run 1,000 sleep studies a year or 10,000 sleep studies a year, in a couple of years. If we have a big customer that wants us to run 1 million studies a year, we'll be able to do so.
That's great. We're here in Great Britain at LSI Europe. What brings you to the conference?
So we just got started with the Series C financing rounds. We're raising 20 million to make the dream come true, right?
Yeah.
So basically what we are doing is to accelerate our expansion, commercial expansion in Europe and in the US. And at the same time, we are preparing for the launch of our Gen 2, which is the volume solution of our offering. So that's what we are doing here, and it's been great so far. Lots of really good investors, professional investors, corporates. So great place to be.
Are you in talk with any strategics that are known for being in sort of the respiratory health market?
Yes, we are.
Not allowed to talk about it?
Not right now.
Okay, well, that's exciting news either way. Well, Ruben, thank you so much for stopping by. This was a
Thank you.
great conversation. It's
My
great
pleasure.
hearing about your company.
Thanks so much.